This is a really interesting story. Like, a really interesting story. Without spoiling anything, I'm just going to ask you to sit this one through to the end because, dang, this is one hecking Christian Minecraft server of a twist ending. Please enjoy this tale of woe as two party members break up and two party members initiate some real-world PvP. Prologue. We begin with me as a student in a new city and trying to make friends with the local nerd crowd. There have been a handful of people talking about how they haven't played D&D in a long time. And I was a pretty good DM in my eyes, so I figured I'd offer up my skills in an attempt to make some new buddies. So I only knew these people a little, but I got to know them much better during Session 0, where it seemed like everyone was building a character that was a heightened version of themselves. They knew each other fairly well, so there was a chemistry already that I liked. We ended up with a mysterious ranger, a snooty cleric, a brash barbarian, a kawaii rogue, and a goofy bard, and, lastly, an intense monk. In this story, we'll be focusing mostly on the last two. Goofy Bard was an extroverted young woman. While she was building her character, she joked that she had a feeling this would be the most fun character she had ever played. Sure enough, during games she cracked jokes and sang songs to cast her spells. She was a really good role player and knew when to goof off and when to shut up and get serious. But sometimes she'd check out during combat. I was mostly grateful to have a bard who just didn't want to sleep with everything. The intense monk was played by the bard's boyfriend. He was hard to get a read on. To start with, he had about 10 years on his girlfriend and 5 years on me. He was very quiet, and I thought he might be somewhere on the spectrum or have social anxiety, but that's pretty common in the tabletop community. So I figured I'd get to know him more slowly. During Session 0, I found out that while everyone else had only played for a few years, the monk had been DMing since he was in high school almost 20 years ago, so I was intimidated by him, but when he would say something and things got awkward, the bard would typically jump into the conversation to smooth things out. It became almost immediately clear that this was the central dynamic of their relationship. In the group chat, when we would plan for the next game, the bard would RSVP for herself and the monk, sparing him the need to talk to people. During games, when he would stare intensely at his character sheet or at the map, the bard would lean over and ask what he was thinking of doing, and then encourage him to try the idea. When he did something creative in combat, she would laugh hysterically and tell him it was brilliant. Later on, I would see them do this at parties, with her encouraging him to tell stories and be more involved in conversations. They had a very yin-yang thing going, and it seemed to function. Some sessions, though, they didn't function at all. There were times when the monk was unhappy and would have a very cold stare, which our loudmouth barbarian called serial killer face, and when she was sure he couldn't hear her. The barbarian received these stares more often than anyone, but there were a few times where I made an in-game call that warranted an icy dagger stare from the monk. When Monk was stuck in serial killer mode, nothing Bard did or said would knock him out of it. I would watch her look at him and try and put on a smile, make a joke, or touch his shoulder, and then realize what she was doing had absolutely no effect. I once saw her look back down at her character sheet and completely drop the smile, looking suddenly exhausted. She wouldn't sing on those days, and her jokes tended to be more like insults than zingers. Then something happened. I still don't know what exactly, but something. Between sessions, we were in our group chat trying to figure out if everyone was free that Wednesday, which was our typical meeting day. Everyone RSVP'd, and Bard, who typically answered for herself and Monk, simply said, "I'll be there, but I can't speak for anyone else." Well, that's kind of awkward, but okay. Monk's little read receipt bubble moved down. He had seen everyone's messages, but he said nothing. That Tuesday, Bard sent me a private message. Bard, hey, I don't mean to bother you, but have you heard from Monk about if he's coming tomorrow? Me, I have not. He hasn't said anything. Bard, okay, well, I want to apologize in advance for how weird this is, but Monk and I aren't together anymore. He told me I can't talk to him, so I don't know if he's available for the game or anything. I was hoping he'd say something in the chat, but it seems like he doesn't want to talk there either. I'm not sure how this goes, but you're the DM and it's your game, so I figured I'd let you make a call. If he still wants to play, I can drop out to make the table less weird. Just don't want to screw the game up. Me. Well, first off, you're fine. Thank you for telling me. If he doesn't want to communicate with the group, then I feel he's decided to bail on us, but I'll reach out to him to confirm. Do you not feel comfortable playing with him at the table? Bard, I can make anything work. If he wants to play, then I am capable of being an adult about it and just playing, but I don't want to put anyone in a weird spot. Me, sounds good. I'll see what's what. You just worry about what you're gonna do when you guys get to the orc encampment. So I messaged the monk. Hey monk, it's me, your DM, getting a head count for tomorrow. I wanted to see whether or not you'd plan on being there. Thanks. No response. He didn't even open the message. Wednesday came and the monk didn't show. The bard was nervous and quiet towards the beginning, but once she realized he was not coming, she loosened up a little bit, and the rest of the party seemed to be at least partially aware of what was going on, and we did our best to bring her spirits up, both figuratively and literally, with our kawaii rogue bringing out some red wine to share. After the game, everyone left but the ranger, who is a charity organizer in real life and a proud owner of some huge muscles. He advised me to boot Monk from the group chat. He had a lot more information than I did about the split, and he told me about as much as I needed to know to understand the situation. According to the ranger, the bard currently felt unsafe, but was afraid to talk about it because she didn't want to hurt Monk's reputation. During the argument which had incited the breakup, the monk had become increasingly agitated and threatening to the point where Bard had left his house without shoes or a coat, calling Ranger frantically for a ride home. Ranger spent the rest of the day with her, and Bard spent hours shaking and crying. The ranger tried to get information from Bard about what had happened and why she ran from the house without anything to protect her from the cold. And eventually she calmed down and told Ranger everything. Although the word was never used, the description of Monk's behavior sounded like straight-up abuse. No wonder she was falling apart. This woman was terrified. The serial killer stare didn't seem like much of a joke anymore, as it turned out. Monk could be violent and in fact had a violent criminal history. Ranger had been incredulous at first, but confirmed this independently. Monk had been having run-ins with law enforcement for years. All I could think of was how many times this guy had sat at my dinner table, and the most I could figure out was, he's kind of shy. I didn't want him to come back, but I was also a little bit scared, so I waited a few days before I booted him from the group chat. Bye-bye, Monk. I'm sorry your character didn't have a cooler player. That Wednesday, I'm setting up at the table. Ranger, Barbarian, and Bard are there, and we're waiting on Rogue and Cleric. Out of the corner of my eye, I see it. Monk's car. What is he doing here? Borrowing the perception skills of his character, Ranger notices right before I do and tries to distract Bard in the kitchen. Ooh, Bard, have you tried these chips? It works for a moment, but soon Bard realizes that Monk is getting out of his car and walking up to the house. She freezes, then springs into action and grabs her laptop, her notebook, her purse, and all of her belongings basically, and runs to the back of the house. She locks herself in the bathroom of the master bedroom and barricades the door. It isn't until this moment that I fully understand just how unsafe Bard feels. At the front of the house, I don't feel so safe either. Monk gets to the front door and starts to open it, but Bard is already there, and instead of letting Monk inside, he goes out into the porch to talk to him. I stand against the door and eavesdrop. Ranger is trying to be delicate. Hey man, we didn't hear from you, and Bard said you guys weren't talking, so we thought you bailed out on the game. Monk starts getting agitated, telling Ranger that this is BS and that he knows that's not the real reason he was booted. She thinks she can sabotage my social life just because her feelings are hurt. She thinks she can turn you all against me. Monk sounds emotional for the first time, angry and paranoid, and he's got that look on his face. But it is frickin' terrifying in this context. Right about now, Cleric and Rogue arrive together in Rogue's car. Oh joy. I start trying to call Rogue from my phone to tell her to stay in the car, but she doesn't look at her phone. They try to get out of the car, confused and freaked out, and attempt to get past the two men in order to get to the house. The monk sees that they're going into the house and tries to follow them in. The ranger realizes what the monk is about to do and grabs him by the shoulders. Roll for initiative. Rogue and Cleric squeeze in, and for a brief moment the sound from outside is making its way in quite clearly. Barbarian gets spooked and starts closing and locking more doors between the living room and Bard, and Cleric and Rogue get inside, but Ranger is still out scrapping with Monk as they both let up their pent-up aggression out. We gave it a second, thinking Ranger could still take care of this on his own, but then Monk decked him in the face and we saw blood, so Cleric suggested calling the police. And I quickly agreed. She shouts through the window that she's doing this, and Monk snaps back to reality. He shouts that it's not necessary and rushes back to his car, driving off. The Ranger walks back into the house, scraped up and a little bloody, and sits up against the wall like he's in shock. Officers arrived not too long after, and one of them went to the bathroom in the back to assure Bard that it was safe to come out. She was white as a sheet when she walked out of the bathroom, and I felt awful for her. How long has she been dealing with this? The police spoke to us individually. The Ranger wanted to press charges, and Bard was able to give the police Monk's license plate number. They pulled him over later that day and ended up finding drugs in his car. A lot of drugs. Like the amount that you have when you're selling it. Ranger ended up dropping his charge later on. It was too much trouble, he said. But Monk still had to deal with a lot of legal repercussions from what the cops discovered that day. Epilogue. We took a break for a couple of weeks, then decided it was time for a quest to continue. Bard was in low spirits for a while, but she did her best to soldier on, and soon enough she did a complete 180. She started writing full songs about the adventures and laughing again. I believe she also got set up with domestic abuse counseling and did a lot of work on her own to heal from her experiences with Monk. Ranger got even more swole after this. He was PO'd at Monk for a while, but ultimately happy that he had stopped him from getting in the house that day. I was outrageously grateful, and there's no telling how dangerous things could have gotten, and I've told him many times how much I appreciate his actions. Monk is somewhere out there, I guess, in jail probably, or rehab. His social media stopped updating not too long after the dust settled, and so after Ranger dropped his charges, we didn't get any more updates. We haven't heard from him in over a year though, so I think it's safe. In-game, his character tripped into a pond and drowned. Oops. And as for me, I've learned to vet my players. Yes, that now includes background checks for anyone I don't know who wants to show up to my house. I'd rather be safe than sorry. End post. This was a very well written post. I'll give it that. It was also pretty heartwarming too, seeing as this group that basically only met each other through D&D had each other's backs. Especially Bard's back, the whole time, and I can guarantee you that this group will remain good friends for a very long time. On top of that, this D&D group may have saved this poor woman from what could have been a long relationship of domestic abuse. Anyways, thanks for watching up to this point, and if you want to help me out, then please leave me a like, and if you want to see more of my videos, then by all means subscribe to my channel. This has been CritCrab. Till next time.